Hi guys, it's Amber from Amber Reads Books, and I'm here today to bring you my weekly reads video. This is the video where I discuss what I read last week, what I'm currently reading, what I hope to read for the coming week. This past week was another week where I just didn't think I was going to be as busy as I was. But I am tired of getting on here saying, oh, I didn't get as many books read as I hoped to. So I'm not going to say that anymore. I am just going to say I am proud that I only read, this week it was 2 books. I am proud I read 2 books, because with the amount of things I had to do, that is quite an accomplishment in itself. So no more am I gonna be apologizing for the number of books that I read. I am just going to come on and be proud of whatever number, whether that's half of a book or 5 books. I don't care. I'm just gonna be proud of whatever number, happens to be it for that week. But yeah, it was just a busy week this week. I only had 3 days of work, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but I had stuff to do after work for, I think, all 3 of those days. So it was just one of those weeks where you think it's gonna go by so quickly because it's only 3 days, but it felt like it took forever. It felt like the longest week in history. And then the weekend came, and normally I'd be really excited about it, but I had a lot of stuff to do on Saturday, errands to run. It was Kaylee's 14th birthday this weekend, so we had to celebrate, but I also took her to go get her hair cut, and we had a few last minute things to pick up from the store. So the only day I really got to relax at all was Sunday, and I was doing stuff around the house that I needed to catch up on for the week. So I was still able to finish these 2 books, and I'm really excited to talk about them, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with my lower ranked book first, and that is Chasing Justice by Carrie Max Cook. Now, this is my lowest ranked book, but there was only 2 books this week, and this one was rated 3.5 stars, so it was still up there on the scale. It wasn't like it was like a 1 or a 2 or anything. This is the story of a man who freed himself after 2 decades on death row for a crime he did not commit. I found this book at times very interesting. It definitely opened up a very large thought process in me about how the justice system works, how it doesn't, how it fails people sometimes, what could have been done differently in this case. All those sorts of questions, popped up and really made me think as I was reading this. It was very easy to read. I was able to follow along. There were some parts that were a little heavy in the courtroom stuff, but they were few and far between, so it didn't feel very heavy to me, and I was able to finish this in a day and a half, so it was easy. This book is told solely from his perspective, so the only problem I really had with it and why it didn't rank higher for me was because it's told only from his perspective, and he was blind to a lot of the things that were going on in his case, because he was held in solitary confinement for the majority of the time in jail before, he got sentenced to death row and everything. So he did not know a lot of stuff that was going on. The only things he knew that was going on were what was coming from his lawyer. And so as a reader, I felt those holes in the storyline. There was a few things that were mentioned about, I don't want to give anything away, so I'm trying to word this properly. There's a few things that were mentioned about how they convicted him, some of the evidence and some of the accusations and things like that, that I was like, oh, well, how are they going to combat this in the trial? And they didn't. And then those questions that people had brought up and statements that they had made and evidence that they had, some of that stuff was not refuted. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about it, and I did not. So that kind of drew me back a little bit. But overall, I really like the book. I really think it is worth reading because it definitely makes you think about our justice system and how it could be improved. The first line in this book is, oops, hold on, wrong page. On August 5th, 1977, I was a 21-year-old bartender at the Holiday Club in Port Arthur, Texas. The next book that I read was #onthebooktubeshelf's January pick, and I really enjoyed this. This was Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. This is a historical fiction novel that is set in World War II. It follows 3 different women, and the events that happen in this book are based on actual events. So yeah, their storylines themselves, the characters, some of them may be, fictionalized, but the main events actually happened. So I found that really interesting. I have read many fictional World War II novels. And when I say many, I mean probably over 100. I mean, I've read quite a few. So for me, when I first started this book, the only thing that kept me really interested was that it was based on true events. So I had to find out what happened in the story. But the writing was fine. I absolutely enjoyed it. But the stories, after a while, when you've read so many of the books, they all sort of blend together. I mean, I've even read one that started the same way as one of the characters in here, and it just kind of, I was like, wait a minute, is this going to take a different turn at some point, or is it going to be kind of like your straightforward fictionalized World War II novel? But it did take a turn, and I really ended up enjoying it. It follows 3 different women. One is named Caroline, and she lives in New York City during the war. One is named Kasia, and she is from Poland. She's an 18-year-old girl. Her mother and her sister all get taken to a concentration camp. And then it also follows Herta. I'm probably butchering these names, but it follows Herta, and she is and I think the only female German doctor, and she ends up working in the same concentration camp that Kasia was brought to. In this camp, it has been documented that they were doing experiments on women where they operated on them. I won't go any more into it because I would rather you guys kind of find out the rest on your own as you read the story. But in the end, all of their lives kind of intersect at a point, and you kind of see how the whole story gets brought together. Half of this book is during World War II, and then the other half is parts 2 and 3 happen after World War II. So, and I found those parts probably the most interesting. Kasia's story in the first half was probably the most heart-wrenching, and it had its moments where it was a little difficult to read just because of the things that happened, but that is with every World War II novel. I mean, things that just happened during that time period were so horrific. What I really enjoyed, by the time I got to the end of the book and I read all of the author's notes and everything, and I realized that Caroline, who was a real woman, her house that she lived in Connecticut, which is the state that I live in, is not too far from where I live now. And I actually visit that town quite often, especially in the warmer months. So they have a museum of her, that was her house. It has been turned into a museum, and I thought that was fascinating, and I really want to go visit it this summer. So it was just another layer that really, at the end, added so much more to what I read, because I could visualize things and picture people, and at the end of the book, they were writing about places that I actually knew and had heard of. And I don't know, it just added something that was missing in the first half of the book for me. The first half just seemed kind of standard, whereas the second half it really got a little bit more personal for me. So in the end, I really enjoyed this. It is quite large. It does take its time. You do have to go through it, but it does switch from one character to another character's perspective, which helped me keep up my reading of it. I didn't get too bored in one person's perspective, and I really enjoyed them all, even though, I mean, I didn't like Herta too much, but I'd like to see sort of her downward spiral per se. So yeah, I ended up really enjoying it, and I highly recommend reading it. Oh, and I will also say that on Twitter, I had been updating, I think my Goodreads, and it would go to my Twitter, and the author actually liked all of the tweets that I wrote about it, so I thought that was a nice little touch too. The first sentence in this book is, "If I had known I was about to meet the man who'd shattered me like bone china on terracotta, I would have slept in." So those were the 2 books that I was able to complete this week. The next book is the one that I'm currently reading, and that is The BFG by Roald Dahl. I read this when I was much younger. I can't even tell you. I was probably like a preteen when I read this for the first time, maybe even a little younger than that. And I think I may have read this with my older kids when they were younger, but I can't remember if I did or not. What really inspired me to pick this up was the movie came out on DVD, and I really want to get that and watch it. But also, Brooke just read this in school, and she really loved it. So I was like, I should really go back and reread that again. So I'm only a few pages, and I think I'm on page 31, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and we will see what I think of it next week. So those are all the books that I read and what I'm currently reading. I hope to get to at some point, which I showed this one to you guys last week. It has sticker residue on it. I hate that. I have to get it off. But that is Handle with Care by Jodi Picoult. I want to get to this and read it. I do have a Buddy Reads lined up for next week, so this is the only other book that I definitely want to get to. But if I finish this early before I start my Buddy Reads, I did pick up a couple books from the library. One of them is Everything by Nicola Yoon. My daughter has it, so I don't have it here to show you, but that might be one that I pick up. I also picked up The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I really enjoyed his other book that I read, so I wanted to see how I would enjoy an actual series by him, so I'm going to give it a try. And then another book that I've seen around BookTube a ton, I don't know much about it, but a lot of people seem to recommend it, is The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. So I'm going to give this one a try as well. But those last three that I talked about are only if I can complete this other book over here. If I don't get to it, no big deal. I have these books for at least 2 more weeks, so I will get to them at some point. So those were all the books that I read, that I'm currently reading, and that I hope to read for the coming week. This video felt a little bit rambly. I feel like my thoughts were a little all over the place. So if they were, and if I didn't make any sense, I apologize. It's just been one of those weeks, and today is also one of those days, and whatever. It'll get better. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great week, and happy reading.